Suzanne Morphew smiled for a selfie just hours before vanishing without a trace, and Barry Morphew swore he was miles away, but nothing in their picture-perfect life was as it seemed. That Mother's Day morning in Colorado would ignite one of the most perplexing cases in recent true crime history. A missing wife, a suspicious husband, secret affairs, deleted data, and a chilling twist years later, all pointing toward a haunting truth. When love turns dark, even the most beautiful lives can hide the deadliest lies. On a warm Sunday morning in May, Suzanne Morphew vanished without warning from the peaceful mountain town of Salida, Colorado. Hours later, that same neighbor called authorities after discovering Suzanne's mountain bike at the bottom of a steep ravine, lying strangely undamaged. It wasn't crushed or tangled in brush, it looked like it had been placed there intentionally. The scene didn't suggest an accident or animal attack, and there were no footprints, drag marks, or signs of a struggle nearby. People began speculating wildly on social media. Was it a kidnapping, a planned disappearance, or something far more sinister? What had started as a search quickly became a mystery, one that exposed cracks not just in timelines and alibis, but in the lives of those closest to Suzanne. Rumors started swirling about the couple's relationship, and some close to Suzanne hinted that things at home hadn't been as perfect as they appeared. He released a video just days after she went missing, standing alone in front of a wooded backdrop, pleading for her return. His phone also went into airplane mode for critical hours that morning, then came back online later in the day. At the same time, her social media accounts were accessed, suggesting someone logged in using her credentials after she was already presumed gone. In one message, she hinted that Barry had become increasingly possessive and controlling. She described feeling emotionally trapped and talked about needing space and clarity. Barry explained this as a poor signal or a technical issue, but experts found the pattern suspicious. In one message, she expressed regret for not leaving sooner. Though she never mentioned any physical abuse, there was a consistent tone of unease, of watching every move and feeling constantly monitored. The relationship with her old acquaintance appeared to be a source of comfort, offering her a mental escape from her daily life. Outwardly, they appeared to be a successful, loving couple, but behind closed doors, tensions had been simmering. The seemingly perfect life they portrayed on social media masked a much darker reality. Authorities began to wonder whether Suzanne's disappearance was not the result of a random crime but something much closer to home. His voice cracked with emotion as he promised a $100,000 reward for information. Months before her disappearance, Suzanne had been reconnecting with an old flame from high school through private emails and a secure messaging app. It wasn't just casual conversation, there were signs of a growing emotional bond. The messages revealed Suzanne's desire for freedom and a longing to reinvent her life outside the confines of her marriage. At first, many were moved by the display, but investigators were already noticing subtle red flags behind the scenes. His timeline for the day Suzanne vanished didn't entirely hold up under scrutiny. It was Mother's Day, and the air carried the scent of spring as locals went about their routines. Suzanne, a 49-year-old mother of two and former schoolteacher, was believed to have left home for a morning bike ride. He told police he had left early that morning and had no idea what could have happened to his wife. He said he stayed at a hotel overnight, but security footage from the building revealed odd behavior. Barry was seen moving back and forth between his truck and the room multiple times, unloading tools and tossing what appeared to be personal items in trash bins around the property. Investigators later discovered that he had disposed of several items that were never recovered or explained. In a heartfelt video plea released days later, Barry begged for her return and offered a large reward. His emotional appeal went viral, but something about it felt rehearsed to some viewers. Still, there were no signs of Suzanne. Her cell phone stopped transmitting location data that morning around 11 o'clock a.m., and it was never recovered. Her helmet was found days later, oddly far from where her bike had been, and it appeared too clean, almost staged. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her disappearance seemed sudden, almost surgical. No panic, no witnesses, just a complete absence. Later that day, her daughters, who were away on a trip, couldn't reach her. Concerned, they called a neighbor to check in. Law enforcement quickly mobilized a large-scale search. Hundreds of volunteers combed the area, helicopters circled the forest, and dogs sniffed through miles of rugged terrain. Barry Morphew, Suzanne's husband, was reportedly working at a construction site nearly 150 miles away at the time. As the days turned into weeks, public interest in the case exploded. With no body, no clear evidence, and no eyewitnesses, investigators found themselves chasing shadows. Barry Morphew's reaction to Suzanne's disappearance was intense and highly public. He claimed to have left the house early for a last-minute landscaping job in Broomfield, nearly 3 hours away. Further inconsistencies emerged from his phone data. GPS logs showed Barry taking an unusual, meandering route the morning Suzanne disappeared, with unexplained stops along rural roads. Digital forensics revealed even more troubling details. Data showed that Barry had deleted messages and browser history from both his phone and laptop shortly after Suzanne went missing. There was also the matter of Suzanne's texts. Police retrieved deleted messages from her phone backups, revealing that she had been communicating with a friend about marital problems. As investigators dug deeper, a portrait of a fractured marriage began to take shape. The deeper investigators looked into Suzanne's past, the more they uncovered a version of her life that had remained hidden from almost everyone. She had written about feeling suffocated, about living in fear of upsetting Barry, and about wanting to start fresh somewhere else. In one message, she expressed regret for not leaving sooner. Though she never mentioned any physical abuse, there was a consistent tone of unease, of watching every move and feeling constantly monitored. The relationship with her old acquaintance appeared to be a source of comfort, offering her a mental escape from her daily life. What made things even more unsettling was Barry's behavior in the months leading up to her disappearance. Suzanne's close friends later told investigators that he had become more controlling. He had allegedly taken away some of her devices, insisted on knowing her whereabouts at all times, and even installed tracking apps on her phone. With no evidence of a break-in, no ransom demands, and no sign that Suzanne had left on her own, the focus turned entirely inward. The charges included first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and attempting to influence public officials. It was a bold decision made without the discovery of Suzanne's body, relying entirely on circumstantial evidence. They questioned the credibility of the timeline and challenged the relevance of the deleted messages. The witness's testimony was powerful but came with problems. Suzanne's family was divided, with some supporting Barry and others demanding justice. The public watched every update, every legal twist, and every emotional moment. The lack of a body became the biggest hurdle for the prosecution. Without it, proving murder beyond a reasonable doubt became nearly impossible. After years of speculation, debate, and unanswered questions, the mystery had entered a new chapter. The remains were too decomposed to determine a clear cause of death. There were no visible signs of trauma, no bullet wounds, no fractures, nothing definitive. Time, weather, and wildlife had erased the most crucial evidence. What should have been a moment of truth instead became another dead end. But instead of closure, the discovery raised even more questions. The location of the remains was far from where she was last seen, in a rugged, rarely traveled area deep in the Colorado wilderness. There were no trails, no signs of nearby camps or activity. Whoever placed her there had chosen the spot carefully. He had a history of drug use and criminal behavior, making his statements hard to verify. Still, prosecutors argued that it showed intent and a pattern of manipulation. The defense seized on the lack of forensic proof as validation of Barry's innocence. Many pointed out the coincidence that just as the case was falling apart legally, Suzanne's body appeared in a remote area that only someone familiar with the region could have accessed. It felt intentional, like a final act of control. His attorneys insisted that he had been wrongly accused, and now that Suzanne had been found, the state should focus on finding the real perpetrator. A group of hikers exploring a remote stretch of forest nearly 45 miles from Salida stumbled upon something unusual: a small patch of disturbed soil and what appeared to be fragments of bone. They contacted authorities, and within hours, the area was cordoned off. Forensic teams arrived and began carefully excavating the site. The evidence had gone cold, the original crime scene was long lost, and the public was growing weary. Still, Suzanne's story refused to fade. Her life, her secrets, and her tragic end became symbols of how easily darkness can hide in plain sight. Justice remained uncertain, but one truth stood clear: nothing in this case had ever been what it seemed. Buried just beneath the surface were human remains, skeletal, partial, but clearly not recent. They also emphasized that Barry had cooperated with law enforcement from the beginning and insisted he had no motive to harm Suzanne. His attorneys painted the prosecution's case as built on speculation and incomplete narratives, accusing investigators of tunnel vision. Barry walked free, but not without the weight of suspicion. The trial left behind a haunting question that no one could answer with certainty: was justice denied, or had the wrong man been accused in a case still drowning in mystery? The arrest sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Salida and reignited nationwide interest in the case. The people closest to her were now suspects. They claimed that Barry discovered Suzanne's secret communication with her former lover, leading to a violent confrontation on the morning of her disappearance. They argued that he then staged the bike scene, carefully disposing of her body and any incriminating evidence before leaving town to establish an alibi. His movements that day, especially the erratic travel patterns and scattered trash disposals, were highlighted as key indicators of guilt. And while Barry continued to deny any involvement, the web of secrets surrounding Suzanne's final days was tightening, suggesting that someone had a very strong reason to make sure her voice was never heard again. Though Suzanne never went to the police, it became clear she had been planning a quiet exit, possibly waiting until her daughters were settled before leaving Barry for good. One of the most disturbing discoveries came from Suzanne's diary, which was found hidden in a storage tote in the basement. Her last few entries hinted at a final confrontation. She wrote about needing to speak the truth and finally having the courage to stand up for herself. One entry, dated just 2 days before she vanished, ended with the words, "No more lies. I'm ready." Investigators began to form a theory that Suzanne's plans had been discovered and that her disappearance was not an act of desperation, but a reaction to someone else's rage. 1 year after Suzanne Morphew disappeared, authorities made a shocking move. Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with her murder. Prosecutors presented a timeline based on phone data, surveillance footage, and Barry's unusual behavior. But the defense quickly launched a counterattack, pointing out the lack of direct evidence. No blood, no weapon, no eyewitnesses. What complicated matters further was the introduction of a new witness, a former employee of Barry's who claimed that Barry had once offered him money to take care of a situation. The courtroom was filled with tension throughout the hearings. In the end, the judge dismissed the case without prejudice, citing insufficient evidence. 2 years after Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, the case took an unexpected and grim turn. Dental records confirmed the discovery. Suzanne Morphew had finally been found. The announcement sent shockwaves across the nation. Despite the breakthrough, the forensic examination was deeply frustrating. Investigators re-examined Barry's past travel records, hoping to link him to the burial site, but no data placed him in that area definitively. But not everyone was convinced. With the case reopened, law enforcement faced an uphill battle. The evidence had gone cold. The original crime scene was long lost, and the public was growing weary. Still, Suzanne's story refused to fade. Her life, her secrets, and her tragic end became symbols of how easily darkness can hide in plain sight. Justice remained uncertain, but one truth stood clear: nothing in this case had ever been what it seemed.